We'll talk today about our efforts to restore the cultural landscape and how it impacts our visitor experience. Palo Alto Battlefield is the only national park that is dedicated to preserving and interpreting sites associated with the U.S.-Mexican War, 1846 to 1848. Right now we have Palo Alto Battlefield and Resaca de la Palma Battlefield, and there is legislation in Congress to expand our boundary to include the earthen ruins of Fort Brown. Excuse me. What started on these fields in the Rio Grande Delta would lead to events that would forever change the face of the North American continent and forge the relationship between these two young republics, with Mexico ceding over half of its national territory to the United States. So this is undeniably significant to both of our countries, and it's part of our history that isn't, especially in the United States, isn't well remembered or well understood. So it is an important site. That's about all the history I'm going to give right now. So please come visit the park, come visit Brownsville and the battlefield. I promise you a personal tour of the site if y'all come down, okay? You can call me on that. So we know how the battle unfolded. We know the Salt Prairie. We have historic records. The enabling legislation of 1992 gave us a 3,400 acre boundary. And we know it's on the Salt Prairie. It took a lot of archaeology to determine where the core battlefield was. But between 92 and 2000, we really didn't own any property. So we spent a lot of time researching, which was very nice because we have a good foundation. But if you see this picture, it's probably one of the most, period lithographs, it's probably one of the most accurate depiction of what it looked like at one of the battlefields. Most of them are really stylized and don't really represent. Of course, you got to take away the mountains, because if you come to Brownsville, there's going to be no mountains there. But, this war really ushered out the Napoleonic era of warfare, and you had two big armies sitting on the Salt Prairie lined up against each other, with the Mexican army still wearing their shakos and their dress uniform with bright blues and bright reds, while the U.S. Army was a little more in fatigues, but they were still lined up, still kind of following the tactics. But they had some major innovations, especially with artillery and flying artillery. I said I wasn't going to talk about history anymore, but I'll just continue on. Now, the Battle of Palo Alto is largely unchanged from 1846 because it's sitting at the edge of the coastal prairie, and it wasn't good for crop cultivation and marginal for livestock grazing. That said, 20th century cultural activities have impacted the cultural landscape and the setting. In the 92 legislation, the Congress charges the park to restore and maintain the historic character of the site, cultural landscape, right? We have a problem starting at the beginning of the 20th century, about 1910, Cameron County, Hidalgo County, and Willacy County, all the region in South Texas on the U.S. side, started huge drainage projects in a reaction to the hurricane of 1898 and all the large-scale flooding that lasted for months down there. So we have this, so the hydrology's really changed, and then you add the damming of the Rio Grande River. The Rio Grande Delta does not flood like it used to, and the coastal prairie, the Salt Prairie, which can take water on it for months, does not flood, which has allowed native woody vegetation to encroach upon the battlefield. Then you bring mid-20th century land management activities directly related to that. I'll go through a series of maps here. In 1939, you don't have a lot of activity out on the battlefield, but it's these land clearing and attempts at crop cultivation and cattle grazing, which has really impacted the cultural landscape or the natural vegetation communities out there. It was 1939, still open. 1950, we began to see bigger scars. That's a gas pipeline running through, but it's still kind of a wide open prairie. Then comes the second half of the 20th century, 1962. You get roads in, you get these cultural lines. Oh, here, let me use this. You get these cultural lines in the salt prairie up there, where they've removed vegetation. You see even more, all the way up there, these are all cultural lines in that impacting. You get this big field up in here, which is outside the core battlefield, so we reforested that and let that go. And then you can even see more. They just continue. The more latter part of the 20th century really impacted the battlefield by removing the salt prairie. This prairie, and it's in the historic accounts, Ulysses Grant talks about the grass there as being, comparing it to darning needles and piercing your skin. And if you walk out in Gulf cord grass, it does. I've never had a pair of pants that it won't go through. And so that's what we're dealing with. You see these lines right here that come in the 1970s, and they're still there today. And that's because cordgrass on its own does not fill in. It doesn't migrate. It grows in clumps. It's not in rhizomes. So that's one of our biggest challenges in restoring the cultural setting, being accurate, but also we need the cordgrass for fire, which is going to be the most efficient management tool we have. Until this day. Y'all see that, or is there a lot of light on that? Y'all see the mats pretty good? Okay. Yeah, so this is a modern day map. This is showing what we own and what we don't own. And so since this is a private in-holding still, we're only concentrating on this part of the core battlefield. We've done intensive archaeology, so we know where the core battlefield stops. And so everything over here west, we're just going to leave nature take its course. Let it fill in with brush. It will act as a buffer for us, for the sound, for the highway right here, for this highway. We won't be able to see it, and we'll cut down some of the sound. And then it will also serve as a habitat for cats and the ocelot. We do have an ocelot. We don't have a big enough area to have a breeding population, but we have had some transitory ocelots come through. But bobcats, coyote, that other habitat is going to be valuable for that. Meanwhile, we'll concentrate on preserving and restoring the cultural landscape on the core battlefield up there. They said earlier, it takes a village. I'm the only resource person in the park. And so I depend on partnerships. And as you see here, I really rely, thanks to Joel Wagner, who is a hydrologist with the Water Resources Division in Fort Collins, his persistence and keeping a partnership. This project here is called the Resaca Restoration and Adjacent Coastland Prairie. It partners with Colorado State University, David Cooper, he's a wetland ecologist, and USDA NRCS Plant Materials Center Director John Lloyd Riley. And without these help, we're making ground. We're trying to discover the most efficient way to reintroduce cordgrass, because like I said, it's accurate, but it's going to give us the tool to keep woody vegetation at bay without having to progressively. But also, started with the Resaca Restoration, which is right in there. And in the 1950s, let's see, here's a map of the area. In the 1950s, during a major drought, they put these two livestock tanks, and they drug ditches on the inner side of the Resaca here, and throwing the spoil pile on the outside, making these artificial levees so the Resaca wouldn't function naturally like it did, and then plus impacting the cultural landscape by changing it. This Resaca, during the battle, and here I go talking about history again, during the battle, the Mexican cavalry was trying to outflank the American on the west, and they crossed this twice. It slowed them down because they didn't really see it. It just looked like ground, but then they had water bodies in it, and it slowed them down and allowed the American artillery to position itself and repel them from there. We also did, before we did any ground moving, we did some backhoe trenching in there just to see where the historic natural ground level, the historic levee was compared with the spoil pile. And in this, we also determined that this resaca, how many of y'all know what a resaca is? That's a pretty good amount. A resaca is an abandoned channel, main channel, or distributary channel of the Rio Grande Delta system. So we determined, based upon the science, that this was abandoned about 500 years ago. And naturally what happens, as you see through some of those aerials, they fill in. They only hold water in times of tropical storms or heavy rain. So this is what it looks like. I can't see these great. I see it better on my computer top. But these are the artificial levees berms. This is the resaca back here, and this is a tank right there, and then these are the berms that stop. We pushed all that in, and now we have an even flow where the broad prairie sheet flows into the resaca basin like it should be doing naturally. While we're doing, this is the result, and now native vegetation has come back on here. But also, we have a problem. Like I said, woody vegetation, cattle grazing has allowed woody vegetation, and then the changes in hydrology to encroach upon the battlefield. And this is where, it was bare earth. We had cattle here. Came up, it should look like this, where there hadn't been removed all the vegetation. This is cordgrass. This is that private inholding right there. This is the fence. This is all good cordgrass prairie, and that's what it should look like. If you notice, there are a few trees out there, but that's natural. It's the area that's been highly disturbed where mesquite and huisache will rush in and invade. All those other trees were about 20 years old. I'll show another picture of them right now. In 2016, we partnered with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We're going to mechanically reduce the brush on the prairie. We got a big roller chopper. The park put in about $25,000. Fish and Wildlife matched that with about $45,000. And the reason they're interested in restoring the prairie on Palo Alto is because of the Oplomato falcon. An endangered species that's recovering, and this is in the heart of their territory right there. And so they're willing to, it's a Fish and Wildlife's coastal program out of Corpus, and they benefit. We have a breeding pair of Oplomatos on the eastern part of the park. Well, we had a big roller chopper machine, and we were able to clear all the brush in that one area. It leaves it down like this, where actually you drive with little buggies or carts that we have, UTVs, without having to worry about puncturing tires or anything like that. And that's cordgrass right there where it's in. We had areas that once looked like this. You see that gas sign, natural gas pipeline sign? Now look like that. Did y'all see that good? No, it's kind of dark. I don't know if we could turn off these lights here at all, or no. Okay, well. If it was darker, you could see it better. I'm sorry. The areas look, you should be able to see this. Areas that look like that now look like that, wide open. Okay, there we go. All right. Let me go back and see if that one comes out better. Yeah, right? Should I start over again from the beginning? No, I'm just kidding. All right. So, what happens? We do the mechanical treatment at first. Next spring, you get all these young sprouts coming out, so we got to herbicide treat them. We do the basal bark, which is training. Basal bark, you get a concentration of vegetable oil, about 75% to 25% Garlon 4, and you just coat the first about from the knee high down, get a good coating around, and it's about 90% effective. The next spring, not 10% of the trees will come back. Of course, we do it systematically, come in, and we do it, get ready, but also while we're doing this, because this is the area, a lot of the area where we're doing this is without cordgrass. There's a large part of the cord battlefield where the cordgrass was totally removed. There's some areas that still has it. So we're working on reintroducing Gulf cordgrass. Like I said, we're working on trying to find the most efficient way to reintroduce it. The tried and true way is getting grass plugs, splitting them, and then growing them in containers and putting them out. We've also been working on gathering seeds. We've been gathering seeds from the Fish and Wildlife Bahia Grande unit, which they do fires regularly, and we find out those seeds have a much higher germination rate because the grasses were burned the year before, and so when they come back in the spring, the seeds are much readily produced because they've been in shock. And so we collect those. We actually taking them up to USDA. They process the seeds, and then we send them up to a vegetable grower in San Antonio, and we get nice little plugs like that. And then we plant them in there. This was planting back in 2016, maybe, this one. And this is what it looks like. There was no cordgrass out here at all. After 3 years, it's coming back. It looks nice. It looks much better in person, believe me. And then this was just last week. So we're moving on. We're getting planted. This year, we'll be planting about 50 to 60,000 plugs. But what's really exciting about this year, we're finally doing seeding experiments, or different experiments in there. We're seeding. You see all those flags? Those all little plots. This is one we were supposed to get these clumps of cordgrass, then put them through like a bale buster. But because of the dirt, that really wasn't working right. So we decided to use this method and kind of dig a little trench, put them in there and do that. But we're also doing seeding experiments. And that looks like a big bag of seeds, right? The seeds are real small, so we have to kind of mix it with cornmeal and husk from seeds and all that. That way, because the seeds are real small, and we want to spread them out evenly throughout the plot, so we have to have filler with it. And so we're doing it by hand. First, we do it by hand, just kind of trickling on the ground in different plots. And then we're using a seed drill to put them in. This is what it looks like, kind of some weird instrument, kind of, I don't know what from, but it's pretty cool. That, and then we have like watered, some plots are watered, some aren't, it's half and half. It's all, these guys, John Lord Riley and David Cooper, kind of designed this experiment. It wasn't me, I'm only an archaeologist. So anyway, this is the tool. We need to do all this. We need to get cordgrass, but this is the tool that's going to efficiently keep the woody vegetation at bay, because we'll never be able to bring back the hydrology. The other thing about the cordgrass, when it's dense, after heavy rains, tropical storms, it will hold the water up near the surface a lot longer. We did experiments at the very beginning with little sensors that test the hydrology in the ground. In the plots that had dense cordgrass, the water would stay at the ground surface a lot longer, which also would help to keep the plants at bay. But the fire is really going to be the main tool for us. So that way, when visitors come to see the park, they can experience like the soldiers saw it, but also be able to envision a wide open prairie and imagine two 19th century armies facing up, which really helps us to interpret the battlefield. And thank you for your attention.